All right, so here's a video for note 7-3, which is parallel and perpendicular lines. So the first thing I had you do is take these graphs and sort them into two groups. And then there's going to be one graph that does not belong to either group. So on the next slide, we'll talk about what groups these were sorted into. Okay, so when you sorted your graph, you should have had one set or one group where all the lines were parallel. And parallel lines are lines that do not intersect at any point. When we're referring to parallel lines in math, we use a symbol that looks like this. It's two lines that look like parallel lines. And one of the things that we need to be able to recognize about parallel lines is that the slopes of the parallel lines are going to be equal. So in a minute, when I show you all the examples of parallel lines, we'll notice that all the slopes are all equal for those. Perpendicular lines are lines that cross at a 90-degree angle. The symbol that we use for perpendicular lines, again, it's kind of like parallel lines. It looks like perpendicular lines. So we have two lines crossing at a 90-degree angle. The slopes of perpendicular lines are what we call opposite reciprocals. So when I say opposite, I mean if one is positive, the other is negative, or vice versa. And then when we say reciprocals, it means if it's a fraction, it's flipped around. So for example, the lines with slopes m equals 2 and m equals -1/2 are going to be perpendicular. Likewise, we can have a slope of 2/3 and a slope of -3/2. Since those are opposite reciprocals, those lines would be perpendicular. So here are the graphs sorted. So if we look at all the parallel lines, we can clearly tell from the graph that they're parallel because they never intersect. They're like going in the same direction and they're the same distance apart throughout the line. But if we look at the slopes of all of these lines, they're all going to be the same. So the slopes of these lines are -1/3. The slopes of these lines are 5. These ones, the slopes are 1/2. These ones, the slopes are 3. So those are parallel lines. With perpendicular lines, if we compare the slopes are opposite reciprocals. So for example, this first one, m equals 1/4 for the first line. The other is m equals -4. Remember, we can write -4 as a fraction, -4/1, and it might be easier to see that it's reciprocal. Second one, we have 2/3 and -3/2, opposite reciprocals. This one we have 5/2 and -2/5. This last one we have -7 and 1/7. Again, remember that you can write a slope as a whole number as a fraction. So -7/1, then you can easily see it's a reciprocal. All right, so for the practice problems, you're determining whether each of the following pairs of lines is parallel, perpendicular, or neither, and we're going to explain the answer. So to do this, we're going to look at the slopes. So in this case, if we look at the slopes of the first line, m is equal to 1, and the second one, m is equal to -5. So these are going to be neither because the slopes are not equal and not opposite reciprocals. Okay, the second one, we're looking at the slopes again. So m equals 1/2 is the first slope. The second one is m equals -2 or -2/1. So these, since these are opposite reciprocals, these are going to be perpendicular. And we're going to say because the slopes are opposite reciprocals, and then the last one, our slopes -8 and -8. So these are going to be parallel because the slopes are the same.